Can we play? Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. When I was really little, I dreamed I was playing with this other girl about my age, about 6 or 7. We were playing with her Barbies and really just having fun. I had noticed she was extremely pale, even for a white girl. She had a small pouty face with blonde straight hair. She looked as though she had been playing outside, as her face was covered in dirt. She also seemed very reserved and timid. I remember giving her a really large smile as we stopped playing for a moment. As I did so, I watched her own smile disappear and her lower her head. I asked her what was wrong. You know we can't ever play together again, right? I remember I felt really sad, and I promised her I would come back. But she just looked at me and said, "But I'm dead. You can't." Before I could protest, I woke up in the middle of the night. I looked around the dark room, only hearing my little brother's deep breaths from the bed across from mine. So I went back to sleep, not thinking too much about it. Many years later, I was about 10. I had a very similar dream. I was standing in her house. I remember going by a reclining chair with a man as pale as her, fast asleep. He had been watching the television, I think, but now all that played was the snow and the harsh sound of its feedback. Having silently slipped by him, I then made my way through the dark rooms calling her name. I never could remember it when awake, in a voice that was barely above a whisper. Finally, I came to a room with no door. I peered inside, and there she was, still playing with the same dolls as before. She looked as though she hadn't moved from the spot since last time. Even her appearance was the same. I ran up to her, very excited to finally be able to see my friend once more. In my excitement, I grabbed and hugged her. This was my first time touching her, and I remembered that she was very cold. She felt like ice, and her body was very stiff. When I pulled away, she just looked at me. Her face contorted in a mixed expression of shock and confusion. I had expected her to be happy to see me, so what she said really freaked me out. "You're not supposed to be here." She wasn't hateful in her tone, rather she seemed frightened for me. I shrugged it off and told her I had missed her and I had finally come back to play. She shook her head. "No," very vigorously, and I was becoming frightened. "You can't be here. You can't come here more than once. If they find out you are here, you won't be able to leave. They won't let you leave." I was really frightened by her words. They made me want to cry. I very softly asked her who they were and why I couldn't leave. She told me the others that lived in the house, she said they would be mad that I'm here, and then she said something that truly haunted me all these years. She said, "You will be stuck here just like me." I wanted to leave. I asked her how I could leave and where the door was, but she told me I couldn't leave like that. She said she had to hide me till I woke up. I don't remember where I was hiding, but I remember she chose to hide with me. She told me they were all mean to her and that I was the nicest person she had met since she got there. She said she wanted me to stay, but that she didn't want me to be sad. What felt like hours passed till the man in the chair could be heard stirring. He got up and I noticed he didn't touch the floor so much. Rather, he glided as he made the motions of walking. I don't recall how the events unfolded, but as he went looking for her, we both became scared. We decided to move from there to another room. She said that we had to hide in the bathroom. It was the only door with a lock. I agreed with her and we began to make our way down the hall. As fate would have it, we stumbled upon another person inhabiting the house. She motioned for me to be quiet as he had his hands covering his face. I could hear him crying very audibly, and though she said to be quiet, I ventured to console him. As my first words escaped my mouth, his cries stopped. The hall became deadly silent, and the girl began to frantically tug on my shirt. He uncovered his face as she pulled me further down the hall, but I continued to look at him for a short time. He looked at us with those eyeless holes, and his scream and the way his mouth opened were unbelievable. It looked as though his jaw came unlatched, and the howl he let out sounded of pure hatred and anger. I was terrified. She grabbed my hand, and we began to run. We made our way down the narrow hallway, and as we did, the screams of all the others who stayed there filled the house. They were all chasing us now. We finally reached the door. She shoved me in and quickly entered herself. She then proceeded to lock the door. We could hear them all yelling and screeching from behind the door, and then it grew silent. For a moment, I felt relief wash over me. They were going to leave us be, but then I turned to face her, and her eyes told a different story. There was this look of irrational fear on her face as she watched the door. I now knew this wasn't over. That's when the banging began. It was hard and very precise, each thud rattling the door with its strength. "Give me the girl!" It was the voice of a man. He seemed very angry, and from the way she squeezed my hand when he spoke, I knew she was afraid of him. The banging and that one phrase continued on. After what I felt like a few minutes, the thud stopped. I was too afraid to grant myself a moment of false security, and I was right to do so. He began to ram his shoulder into the door, now screaming that he wanted me. I'm not sure how, but I knew this was the man in front of the television. The door began to give away, and I became increasingly frightened. That's when she did something I will never forget. She came to a kneel in front of me and pleaded for me to wake up. She said she couldn't let him have me. Her hands grasped my shoulders tightly as tears welled up in my eyes. And that's when the door finally broke open. She grabbed me, wrapping me in her arms, and began to hold me as tight as she could, and I began to scream for my life. It is then that I finally woke up. I had woken myself up with the incessant screaming. At first, everything was black, and so I didn't stop screaming. It wasn't until I realized I was in my bed and actually opened my eyes that I stopped. Above my face was my dad's, and from the look of it, it seemed he was scared. He said I had been screaming for a while, but he couldn't wake me up. He said he had poked and shaken me, but I wouldn't open my eyes, and I wouldn't stop screaming. He asked if I had a nightmare, but I told him that I had had a dream that I'd had once before. I said that I dreamed I went to play with a friend, but her family didn't like me. To this day, I have never dreamed of the girl or her house again. I know it's a little choppy and vague, but it's been 10 years since I had these dreams. I recently began thinking about that little girl and everything that happened. It truly scared me, and so I thought to share it with others. Always count the legs of a spider. Let me preface this by saying I have a severe case of arachnophobia. Seriously, even those tiny ones scare the shit out of me. If I spot a spider in a room, any room, you can bet your ass that I'll be the first to leave it. So it's God's greatest joke that this should be happening to me, the guy who regularly dissolves into tears over a fucking daddy long leg in the sink. Just a few days back, I ran into a friend of mine on my way to the corner shop, so naturally I was forced to stop and make small talk. When I glanced down at my feet, whilst racking my brain for an excuse to leave, I saw these long hairy legs sticking out from under my Reebok, twitching meekly. Now when I say those legs were long, I don't mean, hey, that spider got pretty long legs, long. I mean, holy fucking shit, look how long that spider's legs are! Long! I'm not exaggerating when I say that its leg span could easily have covered a small car's wheel from end to end. Staring down in utter revulsion, not daring to remove my foot from what I imagined to have been a very gruesome scene, some part of me noted that this monster had 10 legs in place of 8. Without looking back, I turned tail and sprinted all the way back down the street to my house. At the front door, I kicked the offending shoe off into the street before slamming it shut. I backed up to the sofa, shuddering as phantom spiders crawled around under my shirt. The rest of that evening was spent on my laptop trying to find the species that the spider belonged to while simultaneously avoiding the images tabbed. I had seen enough spiders already, thanks. As expected, my efforts uncovered nothing, and so I retired to bed for the night feeling very confused and very uncomfortable. Sometime during the night, I awoke to the faint sound of scuttling in the darkness. Blinking sleep from my eyes, I rolled over and flicked on the bedside lamp. As warm light washed over the cramped bedroom, my blissful ignorance shattered into oblivion. On the bedside table, so close to the lamp I'd almost touched it, sat a huge 10-legged spider. I was unable to move, unable to think, unable to breathe as I looked at its face. Set into the front of its dark, fat body were a pair of brown eyes, human eyes. They were heavily bloodshot and didn't appear to have eyelids, just big, round, and boring deep into mine. It was an abomination, the stuff of nightmares, even for someone without my crippling fear of spiders. Whenever my head moved, its eyes would swivel unblinking to track mine. Something about knowing that it was watching freaked me the hell out. Then I blinked. In the split second that my eyes were shut, there was a sound of mad scrambling followed by a sickeningly heavy weight falling against my chest. It was on top of me. Its bulging eyes, locked onto mine, were inches from my face. My heart hammered furiously for the remainder of that night, and well into the morning. The spider stayed as motionless as I did, apart from the constant, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, running through my mind. I only had two unique thoughts the entire time. There was the point that I very nearly broke, and actually considered knocking the beast away and making a run for it. But knowing full well it would have probably just killed me with those vicious fangs, I couldn't go through with it. I also came to the realization that this had to be the same creature I'd stepped on earlier that day. In fact, I was certain of it. It took me an embarrassingly long time to snap to it, but then my mind wasn't exactly at peak performance just then. I'd killed it, and this was its insane idea of revenge. Lord knows how it returned to life. Hours after the torment had begun, when the sun had finally risen, the thing finally zipped away in an instant, disappearing through the open door. It was a while before I felt able to move again, and even longer until the torrent of tears finally stopped. Later that same morning, I received some troubling news. Apparently my neighbor Todd had been taken to the hospital during the early hours of the morning. His wife had awoken to the sounds of his sobbing. When she had turned on the lights, she had been horror-struck to find that her husband's eyes were missing, with dark, empty pits in their place. I can only imagine what it must feel like to open your eyes but see nothing. That poor guy. I have an appointment with a therapist tonight. I'll be paying through the nose for him to convince me that this shit didn't happen. Money well spent, if you ask me. So here's my advice to you. If anyone ever needs you to kill a spider, then by all means rid the world of as many as you can. You'd be doing many of us a huge favor, trust me. But for your own sake, you might want to count its legs before you do. Alright, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, leave a like and share. Give me a roar down in the comments if you want more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!